All right, here is a 2009 KTM 990 SMT. Just going to give you a quick review of this bike. I've had it for about a year. I've had a bunch of KTMs previous to this. I've had a KTM 990 Adventure, a couple 690 SMCs, 500 EXE, so maybe more dirt-oriented bikes, I'd say. So yeah, this is obviously more of a road-oriented bike. You probably could put some dual sport tires on it and go off-road, but it's not really meant for that. The suspension is a little taller than a typical sports bike, and it's a little bit shorter than an adventure bike, so somewhere in the middle. So I find this suspension to be really good. So I guess we could start with that. I currently have it set up to the recommended sport setting. I'm 90 kilograms, 188 centimeters, so 200 pounds, 6'2", and I find that it's pretty stable, it's relatively comfortable, and it handles really well in corners. So I'm happy with the suspension. I think it's really good. I don't think it needs to be modified for my weight. I'm okay with how it is. Next, brakes. The front and rear brakes are both Brembo. This does have a radial master cylinder, so the front brake feel is very good. There's a lot of initial bite, and they stop the bike really well. The rear is a little bit softer. Obviously, it's a smaller brake. This bike does not have ABS. I think the 2010 version is when they first came out with that. So those are the brakes. They do the job. Moving on, let's talk about the engine. It's the LC8 990 engine that's on a bunch of different bikes that KTM makes. And it's a great engine. It sounds amazing. It has really good low-end torque. It's about 115 horsepower in this particular version. The fueling initially on the stock versions of these bikes is somewhat twitchy. According to some riders, some people don't find any problem with it, but my bike has the Akrapovic exhaust system on it, and it had the Akrapovic map from KTM installed when I bought the bike. Since then, I have done some modifications where I removed the SAS system on the bike and put in a K&N air filter. So I remapped the bike using a map made by Zuber. He's on a bunch of forums, and he's a very knowledgeable, friendly guy. So put a custom map on using TuneECU, and the bike runs really good. The fueling is much better. It's much smoother around town. It's very clean. I think the fuel economy maybe has improved a little bit, but I'm not too concerned about that because it's more of a big toy. Next, some small modifications that I've made to the bike. The windscreen is not stock. This is just a sort of custom windscreen that I found when I was trying to figure out what to do with the original windscreen, because it just creates a lot of buffeting for me at my height. Again, 188 centimeters, 6'2". I just don't like taller windscreens. They just usually don't work for me. So this is a shorter windscreen. And what I did was I just used the heat gun to melt it so that it fits the original brackets. It does also have a little bit of a lip, if you can see at the top there, kind of like a rally fairing, like a Dakar rally fairing. So I think it pushes the air up a little bit higher over my head, maybe to the top of my helmet instead of right in my face or my chest. And I think it does a pretty good job. So I'm just gonna stick with that. I'm not gonna bother buying a bunch of other screens and trying other things. A lot of the other parts on this bike are AliExpress, like stamped metal stuff that doesn't require any real technology. It does have the KTM skid plate and the rear rack with the top box. Currently you can see that there is no top box on this. I only use that if I'm packing a bunch of stuff because it's pretty large. You can easily fit a helmet and some gear in there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The tail bag obviously is, you could have any kind of brand you want, but it fits really well on this bike. It's great for some tools or extra stuff you need. The handguards are also from AliExpress, but they look similar to the KTM handguards, just for a lot cheaper. The mirrors are also Ali, and they do fit on the stock position, so those are kind of nice. I like having smaller mirrors. This is the front brake master cylinder reservoir. Again, Ollie, it just looks nicer than the original. It looks more like a modern KTM. And then we also have, of course, the phone mount. So there's not much else to say about extra stuff that's on this bike. I did upgrade one small thing, which the 2010 again came on, or from factory, was this plastic piece here. Already had a cutout for the USB port, so I decided to order that and install that, and it works as it should. I'm considering getting a mount for my phone up here, so it would be a lot easier to see during trips and stuff. As it is here, it's a little too close to me, so I might move that around. But yeah, this bike doesn't have any rider aids at all. There's no ABS, there's no traction control or cornering ABS or any of that kind of stuff. So it's a very analog feeling bike, which I tend to appreciate. It's kind of raw, which I kind of like. So I wouldn't really recommend this as a beginner bike, but for someone who has a couple years of experience and feels confident riding maybe a bigger machine. Again, it's 115 horsepower with a lot of torque, so you can get into trouble pretty quickly if you're not comfortable on a bigger bike. As far as that goes, it also feels fairly light. I actually don't know what the weight is of this bike. I'm gonna guess it's somewhere around 420 pounds, something like that. It's definitely not as heavy as a larger adventure bike because it just doesn't have much stuff on it. I mean, the fairing is fairly minimal. The subframe is really small, including the lower weight exhaust system that's on this. So it's a fairly light bike. It's really flickable in the twisties. Low speed handling is very good. It's very confidence inspiring. So it's a relatively easy bike to ride at low speed and at high speed. But again, it doesn't have any ABS or any rider aids. So if it's your first bike, I probably would say be careful, or maybe start on something a little smaller and then move up. But it's a lot of fun. I've only had this bike for about a year. And like I said before, I had a 990 Adventure, which is also an amazing bike. It's the same engine. I think the tuning on that is a little bit different. And the gearing is also different. That bike, I think I had a 16:45 ratio on that bike. And this bike is 17:41 stock. I did just order a new set of sprockets and chain. So I'm going down one tooth in the front, so it'll be 16:41. And I'm gonna see how I like that, because right now, 6th gear is really just a cruising gear, and I think the 16 tooth might make it a little more usable. 1st gear is a little bit tall as well, so maybe dropping a tooth might make it a little more fun. It's not a real wheelie happy bike, I wouldn't say, but it depends on how you ride it, of course, right? So if you're just giving it all the time, it's gonna do what you ask it to do, but it's fine cruising too. So it's got a relatively good seating position. Again, for my height, 188 centimeters, 6'2". I don't feel too cramped in the legs, and my arms are, at a pretty reasonable angle, my elbows. I don't get shoulder pain or anything like that. So it's a really comfortable bike to ride for long distances. Maybe not as comfortable as something like a GS, or even the 990 Adventure probably has a slightly better riding position for longer tours. But I think that's a very personal thing. It depends on how big and heavy you are, how strong you are, how used to different types of bikes you are. So, if you're coming off of a dirt bike onto something like this, it's gonna feel really comfortable, right? It is a V-twin, so it's relatively smooth, again, compared to a thumper. So like the 690 SMC that I had previous to this was obviously more vibey, a lot less power, a lot lighter, but it really just depends on what you're doing with the bike. So I found that I wasn't really using the 990 Adventure to go off-road all that much. I was really using it more on the street, and so I just decided, hey, let's try more a street-oriented bike, and so that's why I bought this. I think it's a fantastic motorcycle, even compared to the new 890 SMT, which I have test driven. That bike is phenomenal. It's a really fun bike. It just goes where you want it to go. I think the rider aids do a really good job of not being too intrusive. You don't even notice they're working most of the time, but it's not cheap, right? It's a pretty expensive bike. So if you are on a budget, I think this is a really good option. I think this bike sounds a lot better. I didn't really like the sound of the new SMT. You know, that engine, the parallel twin, it's got a lot of power, but it sort of sounds like a sewing machine. I don't know what it is about it, but I guess you could put an exhaust on it and maybe an intake and see a power commander. I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff you could do to make it sound different, right? But this bike with just the pipe on it and no airbox modification other than removing the SAS sounds fantastic. So let me start the bike up so you can hear how it sounds, and then we'll wrap it up. So yeah, this bike currently has, I think it's 30,000 kilometers. Let's see. Yeah, 34,133 kilometers. So let's start it up. So yeah, I think it sounds really good. Again, that's a subjective thing. This particular engine, and I like the sound of V-twins in general, but I think this bike just sounds phenomenal. You know, and at higher RPMs, it's got this sort of like a rally truck sound to it. It's quite addicting. When you get to around 6,000 RPM, right around that sweet spot, it just sounds incredible. So it's a very enjoyable experience to ride a bike that you like the sound of, not just the performance. So I think it's a phenomenal bike. I think it looks really good too. I mean, I know this is again kind of subjective, but I think the front it's a little strange with that headlight, the way that the fairing comes down, but it's grown on me. I like it. I like the low fender, the low front fender. The new 890 SMT has a low fender option. I think it looks better with that, to be honest. I don't think the high fender looks good. And actually for handling, for those of you who've ridden, you know, Supermoto or anything like that, or even the Adventure, if you had a high fairing or a high front fender, it does catch wind and it does play around with your stability a little bit. So I think having a lower front fender for higher speed is better, in my opinion. Also, the dual exhaust in this bike, again, I think it's really nice. It makes the rear of the bike look really tough. It's very, you know, obviously it's symmetrical, but it's similar to the SM and the SMR. Basically all have the same rear end. The motor, I think, is tuned slightly different on the SMR and the Duke, and I believe they might have a different tank and seat. I could be wrong about that, but they don't have this front fairing. They just have the front headlight, so it looks a little bit cleaner, but it's essentially the same bike. So this one, obviously, because of that front fairing and the opportunity to put on a windscreen, it's supposedly better for touring, but like I said, I don't really like having a high front screen, so I chose to use this one. You can put the SM seat on this bike if you want more of a Supermoto feel. It's easier to slide around on, and it raises the seat height a little bit too, I think. So yeah, that's that. All right, well, I think I've probably rambled on enough about this bike. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll answer them if I can. Have fun, ride safe. See ya.